Now we know that women aren't at home with their children. 40% of all children are born to mothers who are not married. And many married mothers have neither the possibility of remaining out of the labor force, nor do they desire to remain out of the labor force. I would like to suggest that in this day and age we have to have child care because it's an investment in our children in the same way that public education is. That our rallying cry or our understanding should be that public education should start at 6 months and not at 6 years. The only reason we could possibly create the notion that for children go to public school when they turn 6 is if we think that women's primary responsibility is to raise children before the age of 6 and that they have someone else who should be or is responsible for paying their bills. And that's a quite antiquated and out of step view of women and families. And so I think that to kick off, I would like us to think a little bit about the reason for not having child care now is because we can't quite kickstart a more feminist view of women and families. So, I think I'm in my time.
Sorry, I was doing double duty. The next person up to speak is Mohammed Mehdi. Area Project has partnered with us in the past, and the next issue, Mohammed can speak to this, is going to be entirely dedicated to the idea of children. So we've asked him to speak on that and answer our questions. You have 3 minutes, and George in the back will. You have 2 minutes.
Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Mohammed and Jake is also here from Area, and we're working on an issue right now. For those of you who don't know, Area is a local Chicago publication. It's been happening for about the last 8 years, and every issue is focused on a particular theme, and they don't come out on a regular basis, but they come out of projects and community involvements and document a lot of what's going on around the city with relation to a particular people, thinking about what people are doing. So our theme that we're working on with the current issue that's going to be coming out sometime early next year is kids. So it's focused on children. And we put out a call for submissions for proposals a few months ago around late spring, early summer. And we got a lot of interesting proposals. And we've had a few different events around the city and collaborated with other groups, including Chi Code, to have input from various people around the city. And one of the things that we found with the submission that was kind of interesting was that a lot of it was hard to really talk about kids. It's much easier to talk about youth. And a lot of our focus and organizing and a lot of work tends to be focused on youth and people who are within certain kinds of systems, within the school system, within the system of incarceration. And it's been a challenge to try to really speak about issues for smaller children, for younger children. And there may be various reasons for that. But definitely one of the reasons is that so much of our energy, this was also reflected in the submissions, goes into trying to fend off so many of the different kinds of violence that young people are subject to through the kinds of systems that they get caught up in for all kinds of reasons. And so a lot of our submissions focus on things that people are doing outside of the system through art and through other kinds of engagement to try to address some of that trauma and some of the experiences and pain that young people go through. So it did get me thinking in terms of today's theme about why is something like universal child care, why when it's proposed does it seem like something which is so out of the blue, so far-fetched? And part of the reason for that is because so much of our energy is focused on trying to hold off trauma. So it also made me think about a different context, which is where I lived before I came to Chicago, was in Montreal. Quebec has had a $5 a day daycare since 1999. I think it recently got jacked up to $7 a day daycare. And this was a government-subsidized program which involved different levels of childcare. But anyone in the province could apply to get their kid into $5 a day daycare, $7 a day daycare. And this would seem impossible, utopian, ridiculous, and crazy. But just two things to point out. That one thing was that many economists say that it's basically paid for itself because of the number of women who have entered the workforce who otherwise weren't able to. They've found that the number of women in the workforce has increased by about 10%. The percentage of women in the workforce has increased by about 10%. So just in taxes alone, there's been a huge impact on the revenues for the government, both the provincial and the federal government. So economically speaking, it wasn't really utopian. It ended up actually being practical, along with all kinds of other side benefits. And there's many other terrible things that have been associated with it, lack of various kinds of access for people. There's long waiting lists. But it's possible and it's practical. And just in case everyone's saying, okay, that's Canada, Canada's different, the very same person who as a minister put this in force a few years ago, right now is trying to pass a charter of values which would ban girls from wearing hijabs in public places like public schools and stuff. Very reactionary bill, right? So it doesn't have to be a radical liberal person who puts this kind of thing through. It's a practical idea. It's not ridiculous or utopian. So I'm glad that we're getting to talk about it. I have a mailing list here for area. If you don't know that, there's a website on here. And if you join, we can let you know about future events related to this issue.
Up next, we have Jenny Breyer, Director of the Gender and Women's Studies Department here at USC. Jenny may give us some practical ideas, but they also might be wondrous and imaginative and totally out of the box. And Nate Breyer is also coming up to the stage.
Hi, I want to thank Mrs. for inviting me to come. I was going to tell you a little bit about the Young Lords Party, Latino nationalist group, Puerto Rican nationalist group that had activists here in Chicago and in New York. And in the 1970s, they wrote a document that talked about the need for universal and 24-hour-a-day childcare. And I think it's often, people often think that that there are, I think, we haven't done a good job thinking about the kinds of models that have existed in the past that have the possibility for talking about solutions to problems. And that's one of them, this sort of idea that we need to have, at the same time that we think about questions of reproductive justice and how they may look around questions of abortion and sterilization abuse and birth control availability. We also need to think about childcare in that context. And the Young Lords Party was one of the leading sort of visionary movements, social movements that talked about the need for childcare in that context. And it seems to me that part of what happens is something that Barbara said, is that we are so struck by the needs of thinking about children in private contexts and not thinking about them in public. And we've ceded that argument to people, and we've sort of allowed it to be that childhood is a private act, that raising children is something that should be done within the bounds of the family. And there are just a range of other options for thinking about how children can be cared for, have been cared for, might be cared for. My son has two moms and two dads, and that may sound, like all touchy-feely and happy, but the dads, who are a gay male couple, joke and say that it's best to have children with lesbians because they do all the hard work and you get to have all of the fun. But it does raise this question about how many people you need to care for children, and how, frankly, exhausting and how much hard work it is to raise a child. And I appreciate the idea that it might be magical, but a lot of times it's completely not magical. and it's really hard work. And I think the idea of having childcare on demand, having 24-hour-a-day childcare, is one of the things that might allow us to understand how raising a family is part of the way that we work, and how the way that we work is part of how we raise our families. So just to say that there have been ideas for how to do this before, and maybe we should turn to some of those to think about the possibilities. All right, Nibara, what are you going to say? I've got half a minute.
Well, not really. So we have,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah. You changed your mind? Did you want to tell people about how you went to the coal mine, to the Museum of Science and Industry, and you saw how the coal mines worked, and what the workers had to do in the coal mine? They want us to tell you that. Thank you. It's pretty hard.
Hey, thank you, Jenny. We all are not able to have the model of 2 moms and 2 dads. There are some alternatives here in the city, and we have them right here in the room. We have Chicago Childcare Collective, and we're going to have Jacob come up and tell us how the collective was started, what the mission is behind the collective, and how to maintain this model.
There's a lot to say in a short period of time, and so just gonna start. I'm really glad to be here in this space where kids and adults can be here together. And, we're glad that kids are vibrant and they're making noises, and I hope that you all will encourage the kids, not shun them for being kids. And accepting that and not putting in I feel it's really important not to put pressure onto parents to silence kids. So we want to appreciate kid noises, I think. I just wanted to speak on that. It's something we try to practice. And that's a part of the support system that we are a part of, I guess, because we think that it's not only parents' job to raise kids. I think it's the job of the community. So at Chichico, we're a group of volunteers. We're all volunteer-run organization that provide free childcare for parents who are organizing to build a better Chicago. And that's our mission statement. But we also think that kids are part of that movement. And so we provide opportunities for them to engage in the work that their parents are doing and the really powerful work that's going on around the city. So one way that we're doing that is putting together a coloring book with pages about some of the people's campaigns that happened and that we were a part of and we supported. And so there's we have some flyers with our call for entries. So, they're over there. But I think we're going to put them, so you can come talk to us and we'll tell you a little bit more about that. And you can also come talk to us when there's a break and if you want to volunteer. And also, I'm supposed to, another point I wanted to make is that, we don't think that this is necessarily the solution. We feel like it's this step, and we're trying to empower people to be supportive of parents and for it to be a community effort. And so we're basically trying to work ourselves out of a job. We don't plan on becoming an institution. We think that this is a solution by people, people on the ground who are, when institutions fail, we need to make do. And there's lots of models of that. And there's parent co-ops where parents support each other. And we're just another way to do that. So I guess that's all. Come and talk to us.
Jacob, are there other cities that have childcare collectives, or do you have any relationship?
Yeah, we are part of a group called the International, or not International, sorry. Better than that. It's the Intergalactic Conspiracy of ICCC for short, or ICCC. And there's collectives in the Bay Area, in New York City, in New Orleans, in Atlanta, and there's new ones popping up all the time. We come together at the Allied Media Conference in Detroit to conspire, and we're building a website, so that will be around soon with resources for people to support parents and kids.
professor here at UIC in the art department. I'm also the head of the art department in the School of Art and Art History. And I'm technically a single mother of 3 sons, 9, 7 in 1 week. He's still 6, and a 22-month-old who's over there. I brought my oldest and my youngest son here with me tonight, which I almost never do. I would say one thing, that the reason that we need childcare is because women need to be seen sometimes as moms and sometimes not as moms. And I almost never bring my children to events, but I did tonight because I'm a mother, right? And it's a huge part of my life. But a huge other part of my life is conducting meetings and bossing people around. Or I just got back from being overseas for 11 days as a filmmaker, where I got to go and show my films in film festivals, and my children weren't with me, and I got to just be a filmmaker for 11 days. But I missed my kids enormously. And people always ask me, like, how do you do it? How do you do it all? And I don't do it all, right? So it's in my DNA. My grandmother was a single mother, also of 3 sons, who her husband left her when my father was about 2 years old. And in the midst of still being a single mother of 3 children, she managed to get her undergraduate degree from Oberlin College in 1915, and in 1935 got a PhD from Ohio State University, and was a really accomplished woman, and she's my grandmother, so it's in me. But I also have the father of my older 2 sons. At some point when I said to him, you know, it would be cheaper for you to stay home with our children than it is for us to hire the nanny. Will you stay home with our sons? And he said no. So, which I think is a whole kind of legacy of what it means, like how we undervalue parenting, and how both for men and women sometimes that can seem like emasculating or sort of beneath or not contributing. Then between sort of that guy and this other guy who I have another son with, I had a nanny, and she was amazing but nearly kind of broke the bank, although she became a huge part of our family, as did every single person who walked through the door. I think it's not, I think if you sort of look at Debbie, who we just met like a half an hour ago, and my youngest son Atticus is basically sitting on her lap. Like, my children have been around people who I'm always like, you know, let's kind of take care of each other. I have a partner right now who is ostensibly like a stay-at-home dad, and I'm the primary financial, you know, I'm the breadwinner for our whole family. I was with my first husband. And so, you know, I think that we need to, you know, like, we raise kids all together in a kind of a sense of community. And I depend on my family, I depend on my friends, I depend on my boss, Lisa Lee, who was here at the Hull House for a long time, who's also a mom. And I think that we need to really, in terms of the workplace, you know, support parents. Jed, did you want to say something super quick, or no? Jed said that if he said something, he would like to say that in the future. Hold on. This is off script. It's off script.
Go Jed.
Okay. Well, real quick, I'd like to say what I'd like to see in the future is no racism, all equality, and no bullying, and treat each other the same way.
Jeff, that was awesome. And your reader, that was awesome. So if we want to scale back and actually go off script, I'm going to invite someone up who asked me, B, a student here at UIC. We've had Rethinking Soup now for 5 years. At least every soup that I've ever attended, B is there. So we're going to have him speak.
Hello, I'm an undergraduate here in neuroscience, and lately I've been reading this pretty mind-blowing book called Sex Radicals and the Quest for Women's Equality, and the common story of American feminism is that it started with the suffrage movement in the late 1800s, and this book is all about how that's erasing history. There were a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but there was a movement of people who asked more radical questions, and in some instances put them into practice, and kind of some of them were involved with various utopian communities in 19th century America. And after reading some of this and coming here and hearing things, what I have to say is to think broader than formal organizations of child care. And that these, as I understand it, these sort of 19th century utopian communities saw the nuclear family as very inefficient, and that it's just silly to have one mother caring for children when a few parents could be caring for a lot more children all at the same time. And this doesn't have to be through state-sponsored child care institution that you drop your kid off in the morning, but could include more informal arrangements of just working together with friends to have one or two friends take care of all of their children for a day or for however long. So yeah.
Thank you, Pete. CUPPA is the institute on campus that is often asking the challenging and radical questions. So we've asked Teresa Cordova to come and speak from their perspective.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
The soup was delicious, and everyone's comments have been really wonderful, so I really appreciated them. And I am going to speak a little bit at CUPPA, College of Public Affairs. I'm the director of Great Cities Institute, which is in CUPPA, but it's a university-wide center representing the Great Cities commitment of UIC as an engaged university. So I'm going to speak a little bit towards the end of my remarks, but also I'm going to take the time to reflect a little bit, which I hadn't done for a while, on what it was like to have a young child as I was also becoming, as I was developing my work. So first off, I came out of all the organizing work I ever did throughout the late 60s, 70s, and into the 80s was, even beyond, but there was always a place for childcare. We never organized anything that we didn't also host childcare. So childcare was always provided, and so part of our work wasn't just to provide someone just to have kids in a room just to sit there, but actually provide quality childcare. We had educational kinds of things and curricular kinds of things. So this had always been sort of part of what we did. And just the other day, before this came up, I was reflecting on the fact that you don't see that anymore on flyers for events. Childcare will be provided, for example. And yet that was something that was very much part of our politics. If you didn't do anything, if you didn't have childcare that you provided. But what was interesting is having done that for so many years, when I then had a child and moved to a different context, different geographic area, there was not that same kind of commitment to childcare. And so I had a baby at that point, which was 25 years ago, and very rarely was there any place I ever went to where there was childcare provided. It wasn't until I left that context, went back to another, and was part of, again, organizing work where there was, once again, always childcare. But those first sort of 4 years when my child was between the ages of 0 and 4, not only was there not the childcare, but there was this real unfriendliness, in a sense, to me as a professional woman with a baby. It just didn't jive with people's understanding of what a professional woman was supposed to look like. And somehow, if you had a baby with you, that somehow that was taking from that. And yet, I still always brought my baby with me, right? And I still always brought my 3-year-old or my 4-year-old with me to so many conferences and events. And the cool thing about that, even though there were so many moments when I just, sometimes you want to cry because you would be, trying to carry all this stuff. And to the point now, if I'm ever getting on the plane and I see a mother struggling with the kid, I was like, oh, let me help you. I'll carry your stroller, carry your bags. I'm just really sensitive to somebody who's struggling, trying to carry everything and manage their baby at the same time. So it's really hard when you're trying to do that, but you do it, right? But one of the things that's really cool is all these years later, I'm amazed how many people remember that. And they tell me stories that I have forgotten. Oh yeah, we remember when your son, how is he? And they remember him by name. They remember the his spirit and how, and so it's really cool because now there's all these people out there that have knowledge and memory of my son and have stories of me, remembering me. Someone was just telling me the other day, and I completely forgot about this, getting up on stage to give a talk, and I had my son with me, right? And it was so that was cool, and I realized I don't know if I realized it so much at the time, but that in doing that, I was really making this sort of public kind of statement about what it means to be, that it's okay to be a mother and to be a worker, a professional, right, a professor, an activist, all those things. So I think, a lot of times we become more sensitive to things when we experience them that way. So later on, through my urban planning work, one of the things that we've thought a lot about, or that I think a lot about anyway, I think some of the women in our circles will think about, well, what are the kinds of innovative things that we can do to help promote women's presence and women's ability, and more importantly, that it isn't just a woman's role, right, to raise a child. So my time is up, but let me just that last minute went really fast. It seemed like I talked a long time, and 1 minute went up, and the next thing I know, the other side.
That's okay.
So,
That's okay. You have
okay.
an extra minute.
All right, so I can have an extra minute. I can wrap this up because I thought, well, I'll go the 1 minute, and that gives me another minute to talk about it. So, first of all, it isn't, this is an interesting question, like, okay, so I kept talking about as a woman, and women's role and stuff. So, and at the same time, I think part of our struggle has also been that it isn't just a woman's role, it's also men's role, it's also other family members. So I think one of the most important things I've heard here tonight is the idea that, and I feel this way myself, is that it isn't just a private thing. One of the things that I have struggled for these 25 years alongside my son has been the struggle that taking care of him and nourishing his spirit shouldn't just be my job. Right? It should be the job that men who are coaches, for example, teachers, that it's all of their jobs, it's all of our jobs to think about how we nourish and how we nurture our children. Right? And I think that's a really important takeaway from tonight, is that it's not just a private thing, it's a public thing, and it should be a public commitment. So with respect to urban planning, some of the things that I was doing before I came back to UIC was working at, we developed a small business incubator, and one of the things we were developing was a childcare center within the incubator through which we can help incubate small businesses around childcare. So there are ways for people to be able to engage in self-employment opportunities, right, by doing child care work. There's a need for it, there's a demand for it, and if you do it that way, you can also make it affordable. How we design our spaces, do we design our spaces in a way that we make them friendly to children? Do we make them friendly to families? That's another kind of issue. And then another takeaway, I think, from tonight that I've also heard is these ideas of alternative structures. The notion of the collective, the notion of the cooperative. But I think most of all, the idea here, and I really appreciate the organizers who did this, is how do we think about this as a collective and a shared concern? Because until we start thinking about children as our children, and not just your kid, right, then nothing's really ever going to change, right? And so I think that notion that it does take a village. It takes multiple villages. It takes all of us in that village to really appreciate and value and nurture the spirits of our children. So thanks to the organizers.
The realities of parenting and motherhood are definitely playing out tonight. The next speaker just walked in the room because she has 2 young children and was trying to get them to all the different places that they needed to be. So Tamara Hill Garner is going to come up to the stage. She's a social worker. We used to work together in a teen parenting program, and she has phenomenal ideas of what young parents need and also the importance of early childhood education. So Tamara.
Thank you, Isis. Isis invited me to come and share some of my thoughts. I was so excited. First, because Isis asked me anything that Isis, I call her Princess. Whenever the Princess asks me, I will always do it. And like she mentioned, I worked with Isis. We worked with the Department of Human Services, and so I've been a social worker for a long, long time. I know I look 12, but a few years past that, I have been a social worker, and as a clinician, I've worked in many settings, and I've worked in early intervention. I've worked at DHS for a teen parenting program. I was an administrator. I've worked a lot of Children's Hospital. Where else have I worked? You remember? I'm old. I'm also old, so I have memory. What I was, and then I'm also a director. I'm on the board of directors for some childcare centers, and I'm a parent first, though. I'm a parent of 2 young children. One is my biological son, and the other we adopted. But I love them both passionately, equally, and I think God had me do this work because of the intentionality that I give to my children and also to the children who I encounter. My current job, I work as a school social worker. And so when Isis invited me out to speak to you all, I said, this is fantastic because what I see as a school social worker, I work in elementary schools. And I know that you all talked a long time. I'm not sure of all the things that have been said, so I just want to just touch on a couple of points. What I see when I go to work every day, some of my most challenging cases, I would say, are children who have come to school and they're not prepared to learn. And when I say not prepared to learn, we have to really work with them, on their basically how do you interact with other children? How do you interact? How do you communicate your needs? So if you're in preschool and you're going, I have 1 minute. Okay, that's great. Okay, so, wow, okay, so if you're in preschool and you already don't know how to, if you see a toy house, a doll house, and you don't know how to play with it, I see a lot of deficits from children who haven't been exposed to early childhood programs. I think that is vitally important. The issue of preschool for all, that shouldn't be something that only parents who can afford it, or you have to look for a job or whatever in order for us to take care of your children. And then we say preschool for all within this half day. And who mostly stays home with the children, they are the mothers. And when Isis and I were having this conversation, it really rang true for me because I talk to mothers all the time who come in, and when I'm in my office in an intimate set talking to the mothers and then they're sharing some of the things that they've never talked to their partner about. I told Isis, I feel like Harriet Tubman. Like I'm freeing people because it's like, they feel like they have to choose, and then we figure out what some of their struggles are. They have financial struggles because they have to choose whether they can go to work or do they have to stay home. And I'm a bad mother because my child, he has autism, and I want to, meet his needs, so I couldn't possibly go to work because he needs me 24/7, not knowing that you have a legal right to free and appropriate education for your child. If your child has any type of issue, we are legally responsible for getting that child what they need. It doesn't absolve a parent, but we're here to help. And so if you keep a child home thinking that that's your only sense of support, then that child is not ready to learn. And then they're that much further behind when they actually do have to come to school. I also see children whose parents are not convinced that they have certain academic deficits. They kept them at home. I homeschool, but now, because I have to bring them to school, then they are behind. And so I don't want to get them tested, because what does testing my child mean if they are deficient? And then they fight us. But then their children aren't making the academic gains. And while the state of Illinois, while we're trying to raise the rigor in terms of our academic instruction, our kids are not where they need to be in order to meet the demands of what we're trying to ask them to do. They're not prepared. So I think the issue of accessibility for parents are important, because generally it's the mom who stays at home. And if you're struggling financially, then you try to make a choice. I think that it's not fair to have a half day preschool and then they come to school at 7:45 and you pick them up by 10:30. You might as well sit in the parking lot. Because kids are missing those early socialization opportunities. They're missing the opportunity to learn things that maybe their mothers, aren't teaching at home in the way that it's being taught in school. School lends itself to a certain level of structure, where kids have to organize themselves, organize their thinking within a certain set of boundaries, so that when as they matriculate through school, those early developmental challenges and tasks, they have an opportunity to discover. But if you're going to put them in kindergarten and never been in school, they're going to struggle. And then you have people who talk about, well, let's put them in, a smaller classroom where children who only, who have special education, and they don't even have access to general education curriculum, because they lack so many deficits that they can't, really be in the general ed classroom. There's so many things that I want to say. I know he wants me to hurry up. Oh, this is something funny. So my husband, he's a professor, and he's an entrepreneur. And he talked to me. He wanted to approach me about doing high-end daycare. He wants to approach me about doing high-end daycare. He was like, it's a great idea. I was talking to some people, and we can go and open up a daycare, and we can charge this amount of money, and we'll get the kids, ballet lessons. And I said, why do we have to charge? Why should those things cost somebody $10, $15, $20,000 a month? I myself paid $15,000 for my child to go to preschool, and he's not even a critical thinker. He could pass a test to get to a selective enrollment school, but when you ask him to write an extended response, he cannot. He can memorize, he has a photographic memory, but he does not have what he needs to be prepared to meet the standards that Illinois is raising from the Common Core. So I think that we need to start at the basics. Give everybody the basic accessibility for early childhood programs. If you want to keep your child at home, please let them go, at least when they turn 3. I advocate earlier. Even if you don't want to go to work and you want to stay at home and be there to go on every field trip, pick them up, bring cupcakes, but let your child go to school so that they can get the building blocks for the type of education you want them to have. Go to college and go to high school and be well prepared. I would just say, I think I'm a firm advocate for early childhood programs, early intervention programming to give your children extra support. Don't look at it as a deficit, like something was wrong with my child. Look at ways that you can help support the educational needs of your children. Both my children have special needs. I'm their advocate. I don't play, I pull no punches, and I work with the very system in which they get educated. And I take off my hat as a social worker, and I put on my hat as a parent, because I know what my children deserve, I know what they're capable of, but I also am clear on what their needs are. And so I can advocate to get them exactly what they need. And so I encourage you all to keep up the fight. I encourage you all to advocate for your children. And so whatever I can do to help push the advocacy for early childhood for all, I'm willing to do it. So thank you, Jesus, for inviting me.
professor who loves to be here. Sakila Inzinger Johnson just published a book, Laboring Positions, Black Women, Mothering, and the Academy, and we have asked her to do our closing thought.
Well, you're our speaker. Thank you. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. I'm actually going to be really brief because I know we are at 7:09 and I promised my 3 children who all made the honor roll that they were having dessert tonight. So they're waiting for me. So I want to keep this really brief. One of the things I wanted, I really appreciate all of your comments tonight. I'm in Chicago, so this is the beginning of me building community. And so this is such a wonderful community, introduction to this community. I'm spending a lot of time, as is said, in the Hull House with my students. I just taught a class here today. And I'm also actually on the board of directors for the Chicago Abortion Fund. So I'm slowly but surely finding home and building space and place. But I thought about keeping my comments. I've been reflecting on a book all evening. Joan C. Williams, she's a legal scholar, feminist legal scholar, and she writes particularly on issues of family and work. And so I've heard a few of those themes come up tonight. And a couple of chapters jump out at me. One chapter that she had some points that I wanted to talk briefly about and summarize was a chapter called Opt Out or Pushed Out. And so there's a popular notion that women, professional women in particular, opt out of the workplace. So they get their degrees, they get their, they come into the pipeline of their career, and they opt out once they become parents. But what Joan and other feminist scholars have argued is that women really aren't opting out. They're actually pushed out because of the way the masculine work norms are set up in those workplaces. And so I think childcare is one of those components. The lack of consistent, quality, affordable childcare is one of the big deterrents for women being able to sustain themselves in their careers. But having said that, it's also important to kind of engage if women do opt out, that's a privileged opportunity, right? So most women work because they have to work. Some of us enjoy it, but most of us work because we have to work, right? So for those of us who have to work, opting out is not an option, it's a privilege, right? So that's one piece to kind of build on. So thinking about those women who don't have that chance to opt out, she writes another chapter which it's entitled One Sick Child from Being Fired. So I heard that theme come up tonight, this precarious space that women are in when it comes to work, and also being caregivers. And I say caregivers because we know that most women are not just caring for their children. It sounds like many of the folks talked about caring for other children in their community, as well as caring for sick relatives, as well as caring for aging parents. When we talk about care work and child care, we can really think about that across the lifespan to really look at how we are really socialized to do that care work across folks. So care work for me becomes really an issue when you're also working you're doing paid work, right? So you're obligated to do this caregiving in your family system or in your community, but you're also obligated to work. And so Joan's piece about One Sick Child from Being Fired really just kind of examines how precarious women's positions are in the workplace, and that working class women are especially vulnerable. If I go home to take care of this kid, I could get fired. And she looks at the data of how women are being fired. She also examines legal cases where women are fighting to keep their jobs because they took care of their children. So I think that us really trying to grapple with this problem of childcare, really from what I hear is from a socialized perspective, and not having it so privatized, is particularly important for working class women who are especially vulnerable. So I just wanted to toss that out. And then finally, and I know some of you probably saw me with my phone out, but I was not texting. I actually was thinking about all the people who have helped me as a mother through my academic career as a graduate student. I had my boys as a doctoral student, and then my daughter as an early professor who helped me with that care work. I have a loving partner who I think is a feminist and definitely does his part of child care, but even the two of us, it's still privatized and it's not enough, right? I think Jennifer mentioned, parenting is exhausting. And so even when you have a totally invested partner, it is still, you cannot do it often with the two
just the two of you. So I wanted to just end the evening by honoring all the people who have helped me along the way with their labor with regard to child care, both paid and unpaid. Christine Heflin, Debbie Hall, who's my granny, Ethel Davis, my mother-in-law, Andrea Ross, Elizabeth Marr, Esther Palmari, Mike and Karen Brady, Annie McDonough, Jim Barbero, Jennifer Sutherland, Cynthia Zapata, and probably many, many more. But those were the folks who I know, if they had not been there for me to help with the child care of my 3 children, I don't know if I would have finished my PhD. I don't know if I would have been able to be the professor that I am now. And more importantly, I don't know if I've been able to be the same woman that I am as I stand here before you. So I'll just end there and say again, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed all of your comments, and I hope that we can, as a community, work through many of the struggles that we articulated tonight. Okay?
Thank you, Sakile. I think invoking the names of the village members is a pretty perfect way, a lovely way of ending the evening. When we were preparing tonight, Heather Radke, the exhibit coordinator, jokingly mentioned, or actually probably quite seriously, she wondered if we could, start a revolution around this issue. And at Hull House, we really do think these conversations are a critical component to inspiring and mobilizing movements. So in our way, we hope that this does lead to some sort of childcare revolution. So I do want to thank you all for coming out and for sharing your personal stories and also your ideas for how we can be a more equitable and justice-based society. The museum is going to be open for another 20 minutes if you do want to go over to the second floor and see the unfinished business exhibit, 21st Century Home Economics. This is the connection that we're trying to make with this exhibit. And then just thank you all for being here tonight.